Good evening, I'm Diana Skye and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. NATO leaders gather in The Hague for an annual summit eyeing a major shift in defense spending. But will Europe rise to the challenge? More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. The ceasefire between Israel and Iran has been violated hours after being announced by U.S. President Donald Trump. And Romania's new government gears up for spending cuts amid high budget deficit. And Poland's main political camps clash over presidential election irregularities. As the NATO summit kicks off in The Hague, NATO leaders are set to pledge to dramatically ramp up their defense spending, both to face up to a growing threat from Russia, but also increasing pressure from Washington. Now, our correspondent Alex Kadzi is on site at the meeting in the Netherlands for us. Good evening, Alex. So how big of a shift is this for the NATO alliance?
Good evening, Diana. Well, not since the 1960s for France and Germany, not since the 1980s for the United Kingdom has defence spending hit 5%. So even this pledge from those nations is an enormous shift in defence spending policy in the way that these countries perceive the importance of their own defence. Of course, if you look back to 2014, these NATO allies agreed to hit 2% of GDP at a similar summit to this one in Wales. Now, some of them still haven't done that, but there is a new dynamic at play. Of course, Donald Trump putting enormous pressure. We saw that during the presidential campaign, effectively threatening to abandon NATO allies if they didn't pay enough. Now, it appears his feeling about the alliance may have shifted, some warmer words. We've seen him post on Truth Social what appears to have been a private message from the Secretary General Mark Rutte, really praising the US president, saying he is flying into another big success here in The Hague, that he has driven us, being the NATO alliance, to a really, really important moment for America and Europe. And he said Europe is going to pay in a big way, and it will be your win. So clearly Mark Rutte there putting in all the stops to impress Donald Trump, to make him warm to the NATO alliance. We also heard earlier, we spoke to Radosław Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, who told us exactly what he hopes Donald Trump will take away from this meeting. Let's have a listen.
I hope President Trump draws the right conclusion from the fact that Putin has increased his attacks, particularly on civilians in Ukraine, since President Trump's peace efforts, and doubled again since the start of the latest hot period of the Middle East crisis. I hope it shows what an opportunist he is and how little he values President Trump's peace efforts. And I remind you that it's now already 100 days since Ukraine has agreed to an unconditional ceasefire. I hope Putin pays the price for supporting Iran in this current confrontation.
A clear focus on Ukraine, therefore, for the Polish foreign minister in that clip, speaking to TVP World. I also spoke to Kaja Kallas, the High Representative, the EU's top diplomat. She said the EU is very clear that focus remains on Ukraine, but the headline at this meeting very clearly about defence spending, about hitting that 5% target, which breaks down into 3.5% of core spending and 1.5% of critical infrastructure. Now, exactly what that means is not clear, and therefore, quite rightly, TVP World's defence correspondent Zuzana Jurek looked into the details and sent this full story.
It is simply unthinkable that Russia, with an economy 25 times smaller than NATO's, should be able to outproduce and outgun us. We must spend more to prevent war. We must win this new war of production.
This was the opening statement of NATO's chief Mark Rutte as he initiated this year's NATO summit. In less than 24 hours, the 32 member states are scheduled to debate setting a new defense spending requirement of 5% of GDP.
3.5% should be spent on so-called core defense tasks, and 1.5% of this overall 5% should be spent on defense-related issues.
These could be investments in energy security, in dual-use infrastructure, in cyber defense, in intelligence. Nowadays, everything is related to security.
But agreeing to a new minimum has proven to be no easy task. Some European members, Poland and the Baltic states, are already inching closer to these volumes. Southwestern Europe, however, is largely against pushing for new spending caps.
In our case, 5% of gross domestic product in defense spending would be disproportionate and unnecessary.
And the opposition is not unfounded. Though Spain may have the lowest defense spending by percentage, it places in NATO's top 10 in terms of actual defense spending volumes. In contrast, countries most proximate to Russian aggression, that is NATO's eastern flank, are set to press harder on defense spending.
We had countries of the region investing quite heavily in the border barriers. We had countries allocating their money in express roads that facilitate the movement of the troops in the north-south axis along the so-called eastern flank.
According to experts, the alliance will need to ensure its messaging to adversaries is clear in order to prevent further violations.
So far, we do not declare any more clear messages, what we will do if Russia will, for example, will be caught, for example, if they are breaking underwater cables or, they are organizing other violations, yes. And those violations are happening. To mention, GPS signal disturbance in the Baltic states.
Addressing capability gaps will also be essential.
Need for increasing military mobility and capability to fast retaliation in case of any attack, especially on eastern flank of NATO. So these are things like roads, like railroads, like ports. All of this infrastructure is needed.
For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Now, as the NATO summit unfolds, Russia continues its deadly assault on Ukraine. A missile strike on the city of Dnipro has left at least 16 people dead and over 160 wounded, damaging a passenger train that was traveling between Odessa and Zaporizhia. Escalates reports from the Ukrainian capital.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said there were more than 160 casualties in a series of Russian airstrikes targeting the central Ukrainian region. The city of Dnipro hit hardest. That's in central Ukraine. Now, the number of dead continues to rise throughout the day, but there are still many wounded in a critical condition among that 160. So we will keep bringing you those figures as they rise throughout the night. Now, President Zelensky has condemned the attack, saying Russia is not capable of producing ballistic missiles without components from other countries, urging those other countries to come together to prevent Russia from receiving the kinds of components it has been using to conduct these attacks. So another very difficult day for the Ukrainians, following on from yesterday's attacks, which were again another series of devastating, deadly airstrikes targeting Ukrainians' civilian population. Zelensky's certainly going to be using this opportunity while he meets with his allies in Europe to ask for further support to try and prevent the scenes that we're witnessing day in, day out here in Ukraine from occurring with such regularity. It's Escalates reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Missiles, mixed messages, and a president that's losing his patience. Donald Trump's attempt to mediate between Israel and Iran seems to be crumbling. After announcing a ceasefire, conditions were swiftly violated. Rockets flew, buildings were destroyed, and tempers flared. Now, what began as a push for peace is becoming a high-stake balancing act across the Middle East. Aaron Damon reports.
Donald Trump seems to be fed up with Israel and Iran.
Basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
The US president's sought-after announcement of a ceasefire between the two countries, briefly holding, then appearing to fall on deaf ears amid an alleged violation from Iran, which it denies.
There was one rocket that I guess was fired overboard. It was after the time limit, and it missed its target. And now Israel's going out. These guys got to calm down. It's ridiculous.
Then, according to Trump, the ceasefire was back on, writing on social media as he travelled across the Atlantic to the NATO summit at The Hague that all Israeli forces would turn around while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Reports suggest Trump spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who stepped back from further strikes, bar one on an Iranian radar installation. On Monday, it was these missiles that drew in the eyes of the world. Iranian state TV showing the weapons taking off before heading for the US military airbase near the Qatari capital of Doha. The retaliation was a direct counter to America's attack on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend, causing no injuries, but earning a rebuke from Qatar.
We condemn this act in the strongest terms and denounce such behavior from a neighboring country.
Just hours later, President Trump surprisingly claimed to have a ceasefire commitment from both Israel and Iran. Even so, locals on the ground in Tel Aviv and Tehran did not hold much hope.
I don't trust them, and I think we are in a very hard situation.
They need to abide by certain obligations to make this ceasefire actually happen.
It's a conflict with far-reaching impacts. Poland's defence minister says officials are keeping an eye on the country's soldiers stationed in Iraq, Lebanon and Turkey.
All Polish soldiers are safe. They are with our allies with whom we are in constant contact. We are monitoring the situation in the Middle East and the impact of the conflict on NATO countries.
And over in Moscow, Vladimir Putin met with the Iranian foreign minister, slamming the US decision to get involved. But while the Kremlin says it hopes for a sustainable ceasefire, Putin will also be watching how this plays out for his invasion of Ukraine.
We can see that this axis of chaos, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they are weakened for the moment. And that's the time to increase pressure on Russia.
A push for pressure as the region sits on edge. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
After months of political gridlock, Romania has formed a new government. And now comes the task of restoring fiscal balance. Now, with the EU closely monitoring progress, Romania's main focus is to stabilize the economy and secure vital funding. Pavel Chaskovsky has more.
A return to stability? After more than 6 months of political turmoil, Romania finally has a new government. Its first major challenge, restoring fiscal balance.
The fiscal issue is an imperative, and I am very happy that the parties have assumed the corrections that Romania must make.
These corrections are needed to first reduce Romania's budget deficit.
You have 9.3 deficit, right? That's a serious economic issue.
In fact, it's so serious that the European Union requested Bucharest provide a specific plan of fiscal consolidation that would bring Romania closer to the bloc's 3% budget deficit threshold. One of the main figures tasked with curbing this deficit will be the new Minister of Finance, Alexandru Nazar.
He used to be an MEP in Brussels, former finance minister and minister in other portfolios, and now he's coming back to politics from the Romanian National Bank.
One of the ways to bring the deficit under control will be austerity measures, limiting public spending.
A lot will have to do with cutting unnecessary government expenditure and making it more efficient and increasing tax collection capacity.
Taxes are expected to be raised as well, and the first will probably be the VAT on most products.
It is the easiest to collect in terms of numbers, for the state budget.
A proposed increase of tax from 19 to 21% would quickly improve Romania's financial standing in the eyes of the European Commission. Bucharest has until mid-October to meet the demands of the disciplinary budget procedure. If it fails, the EU plans to freeze some funds for the country next year. A financial boost also much needed in Romania to recover from the current economic hardship. Pavel Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Controversy over irregularities in Poland's presidential election intensifies, with both the government and the incoming president's camps challenging the legitimacy of the voting concerns. Now, Now, according to the National Prosecutor's Office, irregularities were confirmed in 7 out of 9 polling stations, and the recount produced a different winner at local level. What could be the potential finale of this row? Natalia Komarov breaks it down.
Approximately 50,000 election complaints were filed with the Polish Supreme Court regarding the June 1st presidential election. However, according to the president of the Supreme Court, 90% of the complaints were made according to a template shared online by Civic Coalition MP Roman Giertych.
We are dealing with election fraud.
This kind of rhetoric was slammed by Polish President Andrzej Duda in a post on X. He attacked Prime Minister Donald Tusk for allowing his party members to sow distrust in state institutions.
You and your colleagues should stop the provocations, lies, and pressures. This does not serve Poland or the sense of security of our fellow citizens. You need to lose with dignity and respect the rules of democracy.
Any citizen can file an election complaint if they suspect irregularities, and the Supreme Court evaluates each and every one of them. So far, irregularities were confirmed in 9 electoral commissions, and in 7 of them, the recount produced a different winner at a local level.
If we want to be fair and if we want also to restore the trust of the public in the public bodies, it means that every irregularity should be really carefully examined. Also to draw conclusions, to have some recommendations for the future elections, to be able to oversee this kind of irregularities and also to prevent them from happening in the next elections.
But the differences found so far are small enough that they are unlikely to influence the election outcome. Polish Deputy Prime Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz says there won't be a full recount.
There is a will among Poles to explain every election complaint, and that's natural. But it seems the scale is too small to change the election results. For me, the election result is clear.
The Supreme Court is verifying all the election complaints. President-elect Karol Nawrocki is set to be sworn in on August 6th, and according to experts, this is unlikely to change.
We have entire month of July to figure all those situations out. There's no talk about delaying of swearing in of President Nawrocki.
At this point, no proof of election fraud has been reported. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
From the stage in Warsaw to the world spotlight, Maya Todd, a 20-year-old economics student with a passion for music, has been crowned Miss Polonia 2025. Now, fresh from her win against 23 other finalists, Poland's new beauty queen stopped by TVP World to share her passion and plans as she gears up to represent Poland at the Miss World contest next year. Natalia Oriol has the story.
Poland's new beauty queen has been crowned. Maya Todd, a 20-year-old student with a passion for music, has won the Miss Polonia 2025 contest. She stole the show with her vocal talent, wowing the audience with a performance of Beyoncé's Sweet Dreams at the gala in Warsaw. The beauty pageant winner spoke to TVP World about her passion and whether she will use her voice to make a difference.
During my preparations for the final, I carried out a series of workshops with school-aged kids and young people, and those were about how following your passions and developing your skills, your talents can help you grow your confidence and your self-esteem. And that's something that I want to kind of showcase through my music.
A first-year economics student, she is also a keen swimmer with a lifeguard certificate under her belt and happens to be the daughter of TVP World's own John Todd. How does it feel to wear the crown?
Well, it's made from amber and silver, so it's a symbol of Poland.
Maya Todd will represent Poland in the next Miss World contest.
Another day, another tragedy in Ukraine. A Russian ballistic missile struck a passenger train in Dnipro, which was traveling from Odessa to Zaporizhia, causing multiple injuries. Right now, the number we have is 16 people that were killed as a result of Tuesday's attacks. And this as NATO leaders are convening in The Hague, in the Netherlands, amid ongoing tensions in Eastern Europe, with Ukraine's future and security support high on the agenda. Now, to help us understand the implications for Ukraine and what lies ahead, I'm joined in studio by Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik. Kira, it is so nice to have you with us here in studio in Warsaw. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Diana, and thank you so much for having me.
Let me go straight to this NATO summit in The Hague, and let's compare it to last year's summit that was held in Washington. Would you say that Ukraine's presence this time around, compared to last year, seems more symbolic than central? Do you see any red flags or not?
Of course, we are very worried that this NATO summit will only end up with a statement and assurances of moving forward. We cannot have statements anymore. We need to have actions. You see, Russia intensifies the attacks. The last attack on Kyiv, where that I was feeling along with my family and loved ones, was like more than 300 drones. So it's every time more and more. Unfortunately, we are not able to ramp up our air defense capacity as quickly. So there are then two aspects of this. First, why is Russia still able to manufacture drones and missiles and get the particles for them? So the sanctions seem not to be working properly. This is one of the things that we need NATO's attention on. And the second question is how we can ramp up Ukraine's air defense capabilities with the help of our allies, knowing that President Trump has a very uncertain stance on Ukraine, and we cannot rely on our future, on what President Trump will think or do. So the ball right now is in Europe's court, and what we are expecting from NATO is not to come out and shake all the hands and pat each other on the back and say, we did great, but actually have a comprehensive plan on how are we going to survive. It is all coming to a very simple question, Diana. When we are sitting in the bomb shelter, in the middle of the night, in Kyiv, in Dnipro, in Odessa, would our air defense forces have enough of the ammunition, enough of the systems to take down the swarms of the drones that are coming our way? And if NATO summit will have an answer to this question, then it will be a productive one. If it will be a statement and assurances, then more people will die. Then we know that we are not protected.
I know exactly how you feel, having been in Israel, in bomb shelters for a while, so I know exactly how that feels. But you said, Kira, actions here. So far, Mark Rutte did confirm in his speech at the public forum that Europeans would provide Ukraine with 40 billion euros of support. What would those funds translate for Ukraine? What do you take by that, and what kind of timeline would you expect this to take place in?
It's a good statement, because it, again, doesn't say time, doesn't say who will give, and are those money will be spent within the Europe on some, again, plans and restructures, or is it again, a resource that we can use to purchase the necessary weapons and ammunition? It is unclear from the statement. But again, the top priority for Ukraine right now is air defense, because we have seen that Russia has improved their Shahed drones, Iranian drones, again, proving that Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are working together. And this is why the recent announcement by Ukrainian emergency services saying that staying between two walls is not going to protect you anymore. You need to find a proper bomb shelter. And this is why, again, we need to find a chance for us to survive. And for that, we need a proper air defense capacities. And it cannot be promises. It needs to become real facts, really something valuable.
You know, you're talking about drones. Also, let's shift back to this new pact and joint defense agreement between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I mean, they just announced a new defense co-production initiative. How do you think this joint defense agreement is going to shape the way the war will move forward, and particularly in drone production? Probably.
It's a good strategic development, right? It's very good that right now there is this initiative, and they would be moving forward in manufacturing drones. Mm-hmm. So in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we will have more drones. The question is, would we survive until that time? And this is a very simple question that people in Ukraine are asking me and my colleagues as politicians, like, okay, by the moment when Europe will ramp up its defense capacity, by the moment when President Trump will make his decision on what is he doing with Putin, if anything, by the moment when strategic ideas will become actions, are we going to survive by that time? And there is not a good answer.
Would you think that Ukraine is still seen as a priority by its Western allies?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, we see that the attention has decreased, and we see when
possibly the war, between Israel and Iran.
Yes, of course. Like, so this is right now everybody's talking about Middle East, which we totally understandable because the activities there. However, the issue is that Russia, again, is using it to its own benefit, intensifying the attacks.
That was my next question to you, exactly that. How is it seen as a benefit for
Absolutely
Moscow?
Benefit for Moscow because, first, Russia seems to get everything that they need from Iran. And the drones that are coming are already being done, like by the Iran's example. But also, it seems that right now Russia is pretty safe. With the instability in the Middle East, pretty safe from the sanctions on the cap on the oil that the United States and Europe plan to implement. And so Putin will still have enough of the resources to spend them on the war, to spend them on the weapons, on the missiles and drones that they will send our way. You know, the most devastating thing is that for the last, I think, 3 months, every time I'm getting on any interview, it's about the recent attack in Ukraine, which is the largest ever attack on Ukraine. So it's going up and up, more people killed and more people wounded, more destructions done. Like last year, we were appalled when Russia attacked Children's Hospital. Right now, they are attacking they're attacking schools, they're attacking residential buildings. They are just doing whatever they want. And with the resources that we have to stop them, you know, Diana, what is worse than sitting in a bomb shelter, like just generally, is to know that we perhaps have limitations in the air defense ammunition, and that if there would be, if the attack will be very intensive, perhaps somebody will have to make those very hard decisions, and it is so scary. And you're trying to explain to people that things will be all right, but you know in your heart that maybe no. And again, this is why we dedicate so much of our efforts right now to just explaining that 3 years of full-scale invasion should have been enough for everybody to understand everything, right? And to move from strategic resolutions to like actually steps, like something very practical from Europe's security strategy and the 800 billion euros within 5 years to exactly who, what, and when. And this is what we are calling for.
This attack that happened earlier today, the missile strike that hit the passenger train in Dnipro, and meanwhile, this NATO gathering is taking place in the Netherlands. What kind of message do you think that this sent its leaders? If you were there to say something and to give a message, what would it be?
Unfortunately, the war became a new normal, and people are not hesitating, saying, yes, there was yet another attack on Ukraine, yet another brutal attack killing this amount of people. I think we are talking a lot about what would happen if and when Putin stops, which he won't, or what would happen if there would be a ceasefire. But nobody is talking about what would happen if Ukraine loses. What would happen if we fail in defending ourselves? And I think it's a very important picture and a very important idea that people need to understand. Is NATO ready right now to defend itself if Ukraine fails? And I'm not sure that that's true. And I don't think that world leaders realize that Russia is a threat. And there is another question that I think connects Middle East situation with Russia, with Ukraine, with everything. Is, okay, imagine that there is some solution. Imagine that there is a ceasefire and President Trump does more posts on X and very happy. Do you think that this will stop Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea from ramping up their military? I don't think so.
Thank you so much, Kira Rudik, for all your insights with us here on World News Tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And that completes this edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, but don't go away. Stay with us for more news, features, and commentary here on TVP World.